Revolution, we have already learned about the subtopic French society during late 18th century. We have learned about the old regime. We have learned about the estate system. There were three estates. First estate had the noble, second estate had the clergy, and the third estate had the common people, mostly consisting of peasants, farmers, artisans, and poor people. And it was the third estate who had to pay the tax. But those who were paying the tax, those who were pulling the burden of the entire nation and the luxury of the king, they were neglected the most. And therefore, their situation was quite adverse. They had to lead a very miserable life. And therefore, we learned the second topic, that is struggle to survive. And it led to subsistence crisis. And the subsistence crisis was further multiplied when there was some natural disasters like drought or snow or crop failure, and that lead to less food production or bad harvest. Then that again lead to rising food prices, which could lead to some food riot, or which could lead to some high cost of food, which was unaffordable to the poor people. Then they become very weak. They were affected by some disease and they could face death, or they could fight for food, and also it led to their death. So this situation where there was bad harvest, there was rising food grains prices, this was known as the subsistence crisis. And in your book, it is already given in the schematic diagram. In the schematic diagram in the book, it is already given how a subsistence crisis happened. It is already shown, and we have noted it down today also. Then we just now learned that the middle class was growing, and the characteristics of the middle class was that they were educated, they were prosperous, and they had new ideas. And the middle class consisted of merchants, manufacturers, lawyers, philosophers, some farmers who had their own piece of land, and they consisted of the middle class. Now they questioned the privileges of the second estate and the first estate. Why they were treated with such kind of discrimination, and why the nobles, the clergies were given some birthright, some divine rights, some privileges, some tax exemption. So they questioned that everybody should be equal, or everybody should be measured in terms of their quality or skill or their ability to perform a work. But it was not at that time. So the next topic is the growing middle class that envisages to end the privileges of the first and second estate. So envisage means to imagine or to think about something which is possible, quite possible. And can anyone tell me about some philosophers? Can anyone tell me about some philosophers of that time?
So John Locke, Jean-Jacques
Rousseau, Montesquieu.
Mirabeau and Odysseus.
Rousseau. These are all French words, and the French pronounce them quite differently, but we are learning in English, so we will speak how the people of English knowing people, they speak like John Locke. John Locke, J.J. Rousseau, and Montesquieu. And they have written their opinion in their book. For example, John Locke, he gave the idea about the two treatises of government. What is that? Two treatises? Just how the government should function. So treatises means some writing on paper or some essay or some narrative. All right. Then Rousseau thought that the people should have the representative. People should have their own representative in the government. So he wrote his entire idea in the book Social Contract. Rousseau wrote Social Contract. All right. And then Montesquieu wrote about the spirit of the law. So the legislation is there, the executive is there, then there is judiciary. For the first time, the countries of the world, or at least in France, they were envisaging, they were thinking, they were imagining and believing that it could happen, and it is quite possible. So spirit of law of Montesquieu also allowed the people to learn about the power of the government, how much the government should hold its power, how much the executive should hold its power, how much the legislative should hold its power, like that. So it was all in the very, very beginning stage. So the spirit of law, thus with the same belief, the French actually helped the US 13 colonies to free themselves from British colonial rule. So United States of America became independent in 1774 with the help of support of France. And France actually questioned the injustices of Britain in that part of USA, but not in their own country. So ultimately it percolated, it came towards their own country also, the same ideals. The philosophers, whatever they have questioned, that also have come to the same country. All right. So now my one simple question to all of you. Why the first and second estate voted in favor of the monarch?
Sir, because they were not
They
allowed
were
to pay
pay the taxes.
They were exempted from paying the tax.
Tax, yes, sir.
The first and second estate lead a very luxurious life, in very similar to the life of the monarch. And they had birth privileges. They were given some feudal power, which means that they can collect the land revenue from the poor peasants and the third estate. And in that way, they were enjoying the similar privileges of the king or the queen. So they always voted in favor of the
King,
monarch.
monarch.
King. Monarch means king. One man authority is known as monarch. And the third estate were called, but they were not allowed to sit. They were having the maximum population, but they were humiliated. They were not given any value. So that was the old regime. And this time in the year 1789, the time when the French Revolution was going on, at that time, the King Louis XVI also decided to call the meeting. But this time what happened? This time the third estate protested that if we are 100 or if we are 500 or 1,000, if we are 1,000 in number, then every person should be given the right to cast their vote, and one vote should have one value. And this is one example of the new idea of the educated community. Am I clear? Previously,
Yes, sir.
the king called the meeting.
Yes, sir.
None of the people from the third estate ever spoken anything against the monarch. Why that was? Because they always believed that the king was representative of God. The king had certain divine rights. Therefore, they could not go against their God. and the church complemented to the glory and the authority of the king and the monarch. जो राजा थे वो गॉड का रिप्रेजेंटेटिव है और गॉड के अगेंस्ट में कोई क्वेश्चन नहीं कर सकते हैं, इसलिए थर्ड स्टेट को चुप कर दिया जाता था। जितने नोबल्स है और क्लर्जी थे जो कि चर्च के साथ जुड़े हुए थे, वो लोग भी राजा की महानता का ही वर्णन करते थे और लोगों को हमेशा हमेशा रोक देते थे राजा के खिलाफ बोलने से। बट दिस टाइम द पीपल, कॉमन पीपल were not going to listen, and it was mostly because the third estate had a new segment known as the middle class, who were educated, who had new ideas, who were very prosperous. They earned their money from doing business in other parts of the world. They had trade. They sold the silk and woolen textile to the second and first estate also. All right. So in that way, eventually, the middle class became stronger. They questioned the authority. They questioned the undue privileges that were enjoyed by the second and the first estate.
ज़्यादा आएगा।
Was there at Versailles, and a resplendent hall was arranged for the meeting. Now the people were hungry. They were not having rights. They had to pay more taxes. And in that situation, now they saw the luxury of the king. He wanted the meeting venue to be very well decorated, well furnished, and full of luxury for them. And where the first and second estate were sitting, and the third estate were not allowed to sit. They stood during the entire meeting. Think about such kind of humiliatory practices of that time. Women and children and peasants and poor people were not allowed. Those who were paying the tax, only they represented the third estate. Is it clear? जो ज्यादा टैक्स देंगे, सबसे ज्यादा जो टैक्स देंगे उनको मीटिंग में इनवाइट किया जाता था। सोचो 1 लाख पॉपुलेशन में कंपटीशन होता था टैक्स का। जो सबसे ज्यादा टैक्स देंगे उसमें 1 लाख में से केवल 600 लोगों को अलाउ करते थे। So those people who could pay such tax and even then they can keep for themselves, they were also mentally like the second and first estate. Now what happened? Now things are going to change. Those people who were earning their money very hardly and they had to pay more and more tax just because of the wrong decisions of the French monarch. Now they are going to question the monarch. यहाँ पे एक रेस्टोरेंट हॉल था, वहाँ पे तीनों स्टेट के मीटिंग होते थे और प्रीवियस प्रैक्टिस की तरह राजा भी सोचा था कि मीटिंग बुलाएंगे तो सब कुछ उनके पहले मीटिंग जैसा ही होगा, लेकिन इस बार कॉमन पीपल प्रोटेस्ट किए। कोई आप बता सकते हो कि इस मीटिंग में क्या हुआ होगा? लोग प्रोटेस्ट किए हैं और वो क्या डिमांड किए हैं? कैन एनीवन tell me what were the demand of the third estate this time? What was something new and the king could not anticipate? King को अंदाज ही नहीं था कि ऐसा भी होने वाला है।
So they demanded that each member would have one vote.
Each member would have one vote, and how many of them were there in the third estate? कितने लोग थे?
600.
600.
तो इनके वोट का वैल्यू कितना हो जाता?
600.
600। तो क्या राजा इनका बात मान लिए?
No, sir.
No, sir.
राजा नहीं माने। तब क्या हुआ?
Sir, so they
They
went out.
protested.
They left the hall. They left the hall.
This is known as walkout. वो मीटिंग को छोड़ के वहां से बाहर चले गए। कहाँ पहुंचे? कोई आइडिया बता सकते हो? जगह वर्साइल्स है, अभी वहां पे ये लोग जो मीटिंग वेन्यू है वहां से निकल के कोई ऐसी जगह जिसके बारे में तुम बता सकते हो?
Tennis
Sir,
court.
indoor tennis court in the ground of Versailles.
टेनिस कोर्ट, जहां टेनिस खेलते थे लोग, उस जगह में ओपन स्पेस में यहाँ के 600 लोग चले गए और वहां जाके उन लोगों ने कुछ ओथ लिया, कोई शपथ लिया। थोड़ा सा उसका कुछ आइडिया इन लोग अब जो है, कुछ टेनिस कोर्ट में ओथ लेने के लिए कुछ पिक्चर भी है क्या, हाथ उठा के कुछ?
यस सर।
क्या है,
Yes, sir.
बताओ क्या हुआ होगा? इनके रिप्रेजेंटेटिव जो है वो एक ऊंचे जगह में खड़े हो गए और सारे कॉमन पीपल इनका साथ दिए, हैंड रेज करके वो लोग जो है कुछ ओथ लिए हैं। और ये घटना जो है बहुत फेमस टेनिस कोर्ट ओथ के नाम से जाना जाता है। फ्रेंच रेवोल्यूशन का ये एक बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट इवेंट माना जाता है। तो तुम लोग बताओ कि क्या ओथ लिए होंगे? In the tennis court, the people of the third estate assembled and they sloganeered, and then they demanded for a constitution, and for that purpose they assembled. So entire lot of group of people who assembled at that place to get their constitution valid and to get their constitution completed. For that purpose, the constituent assembly was. ठीक है, तो यहाँ आज जो है हम लोग इस जगह पे जो है रोक देंगे, और तुम्हारा जो है कुछ अगर मान लो प्रॉब्लम है तो वो अभी हमको बताओगे। किसी का अगर कोई मान लो वर्ड सेंटेंस अगर यहाँ मान लो डाउट है तो वो बता सकते हो। और जो थर्ड स्टेट है वो कॉन्स्टिट्यूएंट असेंबली में क्या डिमांड किए हैं वो थोड़ा बताओ। कॉमन पीपल को कुछ राइट्स मिलने वाला है, क्या किंग का पावर को बढ़ाना है कि घटाना है? दे वांटेड टू लिमिट द
power of
So they want to limit the power.
लिमिट, मतलब क्या करना है, किंग के पावर को बढ़ाना या घटाना?
Sir, less.
सर घटाना है।
अच्छा, किंग का पावर को कम कर देना है, घटा देना है। और लोगों का राइट्स होना चाहिए, जो कॉमन पीपल है उनको कुछ जो है राइट्स होने चाहिए। ऐसे डिमांड फर्स्ट टाइम हो रहे हैं। और कोई चीज जो तुम बता सकते हो, इसमें जोड़ सकते हो? Do you think that the common people could persuade the king to do whatever now they want, or the king also had his preparations to stop? Was the king also preparing something? Did he call his own military? Was there any kind of
Yes sir.
that
Yes, sir.
was going to order the military to fire at the common people? And the rumor angered the people. What happened to Bastille? What happened to Bastille?
Sir, the common people stormed the Bastille.
The common people stormed Bastille and they had demolished it. They hoped that they could get very lot of good stock of ammunition and arms. So they wanted to collect the arms and ammunition to fight against the king's army. And they were also hoping to release the prisoners. They thought that in the Bastille fort, there was fortress, there were some prisoners. So they wanted to liberate, they wanted to make free the prisoners also. And what happened then? There were lot of events. There was rising food prices, there was severe winter, and there was increased burden of taxes. All these things complemented for the French Revolution to happen. क्या हथियार? During the French Revolution, in the city there was meeting, there was protest, but in the countryside there were rumors. that the manor had hired the brigand. Brigand मतलब गुंडे होते हैं जो वहां पे जाएंगे और गांव वालों से जो है पैसा और टैक्स वसूली करेंगे। और ये र्यूमर था कि अगर मैनर जो है, मैनर मतलब एक हाई रैंक वाले जो नोबल्स होते हैं उनको मैनर कहा जाता है, या लैंडलॉर्ड जो है मैनोरियल प्रैक्टिसेस में इन्वॉल्व थे। अब ये पता चला कि वो गुंडे लेके आ रहे हैं, तो ये अफवाह जो है सुन के गांव वाले भड़क गए। अब वो जो है अपने खेत में जो भी खेती के जितने टूल्स थे उनके पास जो है बेलचा था, कुछ पिच फोर्क थे, कुछ हो था, कुछ हैंड एक्स था, प्लाउ शेयर था, सिकल था, इस तरह के जो भी टूल्स और एग्रीकल्चरल इम्प्लीमेंट्स थे, इसी को उठा के सब यूनाइटेड होके हमला बोलने के लिए तैयार हो गए। और उन लोगों को खबर था कि जो है शहर में होर्डिंग किया जा रहा है। होर्डिंग मतलब अनाज का जो है कालाबाजारी करने के लिए, ज्यादा दाम बढ़ाने के लिए अनाज छिपा दिया जाता है गोदाम में। तो जिस जगह में गोदाम को छिपा के रखते हैं उस जगह में जो है इस प्रैक्टिस को बोलते हैं होर्डिंग। तो इस तरह का खबर आया कि जो है अनाज जो है मिल नहीं रहा और लोगों को लग रहा है कि सच में अनाज नहीं मिल रहा है। अब जो गरीब थे वो ज्यादा ऊंचे दाम में नहीं खरीद सकते थे, तो नतीजा क्या था? द रिजल्ट वाज दैट द वुमेन, द कॉमन पीपल, दे स्टार्टेड destroying the shops. They started looting the shops, restaurants, bakeries, whatever the places they could go, and they could damage and inflict a kind of riot. एक दंगा जैसा वहां पे अपने आप में स्थिति बन गया। ठीक है। and this time they were not stopping at their own territory. They moved toward different parts of the town and city where their landlords were staying. The landlords were staying in the cheto. Cheto means a mansion, बड़े बंगलो है ना। तो जो मैनर है, नाइट है, बैरन है, जो सर्फडम्स में जो भी उनके डिविजन्स हुआ करता था रैंक के बेसिस में, दे हैड ए रैंक सोसाइटी। तो उसमें जो चेटो उनके रहने का जगह होता था, आलीशान बाउंड्री वॉल होते थे, लॉन होते थे, बड़ी बड़ी बिल्डिंगें होती थी, बड़े कमरे होते थे, सुख सुविधा के सारी चीजें वहां मौजूद थी। इन लोगों ने क्या किया, वहां उनके चेटो में जाके हमला कर दिया। ये है सब कुछ, ये जो है आउटब्रेक ऑफ द रिवॉल्यूशन का पार्ट है। ऑलराइट, who can answer? Documents were burnt. What nature of documents were burnt? Who can answer?
The documents containing records of
The
manorial
document
dues.
containing the record of manorial dues.
Oh, manorial
Yes.
due. What is that manorial due? Suppose you are the peasant. तुम एक फार्मर हो, तो तुम्हारा जो कर्जा है अपने लैंडलॉर्ड के पास या मैनर के पास, वो जो कर्जा है, वो कर्जा वाला सारा कागजात, सारे पेपर जो थे, इन लोगों का हाथ लग गया, सब कुछ ये लोग जला दिए। अब कोई प्रूफ नहीं है कि कोई मैनोरियल ड्यू बचा हुआ है। बहुत सारे किसान बोलते थे कि इस महीने हम कर्जा नहीं दे पाएंगे, अगले महीने हम देंगे। तो 1 महीना वाला किसी का पेपर था, किसी का 3 महीने वाला पेपर था। टैक्स देना होता था उनको हमेशा, लेकिन कभी कभी ये बहुत विनती करते थे तो वो लोग ड्यू रख देते थे। तो देयर वर सम मेमोरियल ड्यूज and the villagers got the opportunity to grab those documents. They started burning it. चलो ठीक है, आज अभी बाय बाय बोल देते हैं तुम लोगों को। फिर जो है थोड़ा बहुत इस पेज को पढ़ के रखोगे। चैप्टर 9, फ्रांस बिकम्स ए कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल मोनार्की। इसको नेक्स्ट डे स्कूल में भी डिस्कस कर लेंगे, हाउ फ्रांस बिकम्स ए कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल मोनार्की। और इसमें भी जो है एक पॉलिटिकल सिस्टम अंडर कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन ऑफ 1791, जो कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन बना है उसमें क्या क्या चेंजेस है, ये यहाँ पे एक स्कीमेटिक डायग्राम से बताया गया है। इसको स्कूल में भी देखेंगे और ऑनलाइन क्लास आगे होगा तो आगे भी हम लोग पढ़ेंगे। थोड़ा थोड़ा तुम लोग डिक्लेरेशन ऑफ राइट्स ऑफ मैन जो है उसको जो 9 और 10 पॉइंट्स है वो कम से कम लिख के रखोगे और उसको सिंपल लैंग्वेज में ट्रांसलेट करोगे। ओके